Hey, team players, welcome to picks 11 through 20 according to ESPN as we sit here today on June 3rd. And this is mostly to get us familiar with who these players are. We know that the overall rankings will shift as we get closer to August, but it's important to have these conversations of breaking down because a lot of these are going to be fairly what they are. But I look at this point in the draft here, Bob, second round for 10-person leagues. And again, this is a PPR format with single quarterback, standard scoring across the board. There's going to be a lot of running back upheaval. And when I look at this group here, there is 5 running backs on this list and for 11 to 20, and only one of them, in my opinion, belongs. And that is Mr. King Henry. I think Tony Pollard might be the most overrated person in fantasy at this point. I do think Kenneth Walker is going to have a great year. But the problem with the West is how much is Seattle going to really run the ball with those 3 shiny objects they got? And yeah, Walker had some games when he blew things up, but it wasn't like it was on fire. The Browns are a dumpster fire. And this is Nick Chubb's big paid year. So you can make the argument that they're going to hand the ball off like crazy. They finally don't have him handcuffed, so he's the only guy in Cleveland. But they were afraid to use him when they did have a handcuff. And they want to make it a Watson passing show. And I think that the era of seeing just Nick Chubb be your solid 6th running back and just set it and forget it is over. I think that he's at the end of the day. And when I look at this group, I see Diggs, Adams, and CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown. I'm like, with the exception of Henry, I like them all to start off this group. And I just got to be blunt. I don't like Pollard in this space at all. I know that Zeke's not there. I know that he's the main guy. And quite frankly, he deserved more carries last year than he got. But the divisions, as I said, with the East playing the West, I get that the Cowboys are possibly the second best team in the conference, but I don't see him putting up good numbers inside his own division. I don't see him putting up good numbers in Seattle or San Francisco. So that's basically half of his schedule where he's going to be subpar, and I don't want to put my eggs in that kind of basket. So that's my Pollard take.
I come out from a different way here. I think your 2 Dallas players here have incredible upside in my mind. With the schedule, even considering the tough schedule that they have, that these 2 weapons now are the 2 weapons that Dak's going to rely on to be successful. There's no more Dalton Schultz. There's no more Zeke. Even with the snap share that Tony Pollard had last year, and even when you account for how much he was receiving out of the backfield, which, by the way, wasn't a lot. He had a couple games where it was 7, 6, 6, 8 targets. And so he had a snap count that was pretty much, when you look at what he had, Zeke managed half being on the field more than him for some way. But Tony Pollard still ranked as your 8th best running back last year. And so when I look at what could be for Tony Pollard, I think that for me, at least, when I look at this 11 through 20 ranking, and as I said, for our first top 10, there are 3 guys here that I think should be in the first round and not in the second round. And 2 of those players are Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard.
So you're bigger on Pollard.
I think Tony Pollard has an incredible chance to carry you to a league championship this year if everything swings the way that we hope it does for Dallas, or the way I hope it does, at least for Dallas. And I think that a pairing of CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard could actually work out fairly well for a fantasy manager, because these 2 weapons, if Dallas wants to win,
they're going through those 2. There's no way around that.
They're going through those 2.
We both agree Dallas is either winning that division or going to be the 5 seed, the first wild card.
So if I'm a fantasy manager and I'm thinking that that's something that I even want to think about doing, I'm willing and we talked about upside, I'm willing to take a risk on Tony Pollard, whereas I might not be willing or over Josh Jacobs because I like the situation.
Well, I think that's a given. I quite frankly, I don't think Josh Jacobs belongs in this team. I'd rather have Kenneth Walker over Josh Jacobs. But
yeah, and to the point you were making too,
the Raiders aren't going to be having a lead. Who they handing the ball? They're going to be chucking the ball for their life with the quarterback who can't throw.
Yeah,
I don't want a Raider at all on my team.
And to the point that you were making about Nick Chubb, and this actually goes for Nick Chubb as well, is that he had less than 60% of the snaps last year for most of the games.
Yeah.
And he still forged out a nice chunk of fantasy points for his managers. And so the question is, now that they...
But what did he do in the last 6 when Watson was back? So that's my point.
In the last 6 that Watson was back in terms of like player share here in snap count, he actually had his highest.
Yeah, no, I mean in terms of his production.
Oh, in terms of
I know he was on the field with Watson because Hunt was hurt.
Yeah,
but in terms of what he did
in the end of the year, you're not getting, in the last 4 games, you get 9.9 points, 11.2, 12.6, and 23 points.
And that's not second round value to me.
And so you have here where, yes, I'm not a big Nick Chubb guy, and I haven't ever really been a Nick Chubb guy. And so if you're at the back half of the first round and you're looking at these guys at the top half of the second round, there are the names here that stick out to you
are the receivers.
And so you said to yourself, okay, Tyreek Hill, I know you don't love Tua, but Tyreek Hill looked like he was going to get hurt all last season by the way Tua was throwing him a ball, but he did not. And when you look at what's going to happen for Miami this year, if you love Miami, you obviously love Tyreek Hill. And if you think Miami's going to win, your Tyreek Hill is your guy. Diggs, the knock on Diggs is that Buffalo plays a lot of bad weather games towards the back end of the year. But I'm looking at Buffalo's schedule right now. And when you look at the back half of the year for Buffalo, you've got the Dolphins at the Dolphins.
So that's going to be fine weather.
Bills at home. Okay. But that's in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
To get into your fantasy playoffs, you're getting Broncos at Bills. You're getting Jets at Bills. Then they're going to the Eagles. Then they're going to the Chiefs. So if you like Tyreek,
he could win you a championship himself against those Chiefs, because they're scoring 1 million points in that game.
If you like Diggs and you like the potential of not looking at, and then he has the Chargers in your fantasy playoffs. He has the Chargers.
Is that in LA or is that in Buffalo?
That's in LA.
Oh, so that's a huge game for him. Then
that's December 23rd. That's probably your champion. That's around your championship.
That's what, week 14?
No, it's a little bit left. I think it's week 15.
Okay.
And
that's championship week.
They're also at the Bills December 17th. So you're looking at where are these games going to be at and I'm not seeing what I saw last year.
No, last year was rough. He was playing New England at the end of the year, and they just wanted to run the ball and kill it.
Yeah, and you look at his fantasy points in those games, and you're just like, what happened? 6, 10, 4, 4, 23 in a week that didn't matter in week 18 for most people.
Week didn't matter for him either.
And so I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, who here sticks out to me? And you've got Tony Pollard, you've got Diggs, you've got CeeDee Lamb. Another guy that obviously is going to stick out to a lot of people is A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was an incredible pickup.
Good
by the Eagles last year.
So instrumental, that offense.
And you take a look at his stats. He was the 6th best wide receiver in fantasy. He had 1 week, or he had 2 weeks 3 weeks that were below 10 points. So you can manage that. You can get over that. When it hit fantasy playoff time, he was rolling.
Stud.
And so you say to yourself, okay, well, as I look at this right now, who stands out? And it's in this group, it's the wide receivers.
Yes, no doubt.
If you went wide receiver in the first round and you go wide receiver again in the second round, you're putting yourself at a position where you're either going to keep going wide receiver in the third round, or you're going to go with a running back in the third round.
See, for me, that becomes way too stressful because at the end of the day here, sure, Brown's great, but I can get Devontae Smith, who's not that far off production. His name hasn't come up yet. I like Cooks in Dallas as a solid number 2. The running back world, mostly the number 2 doesn't do anything. And this is why, even if I, would have to reach and get Taylor at the 5 spot, I would rather do that than go for Kupp, obviously. But it also requires talent on the board here. And for me, again, we talked about Pollard. We started off the show with that. I'm going to get into why I don't think Tyreek Hill is value. And 2 is a big part of this, but mostly it's because I'd rather have Waddle when it's all said and done.
You have both?
I don't want both. I don't want both because I saw that their coach doesn't care about Tua. And as soon as Tua gets hurt, that team is useless. And I think that the Tua and Tyreek Hill injuries are the 2 most projectable injuries based upon their usage. Tyreek Hill had never been hit as many times as he got hit last year. And as soon as his speed goes, which is his only real weapon, he's useless. Waddle, on the other hand, is not a one-trick pony. I believe Waddle is going to surpass Tyreek Hill as it is. Even if Tyreek doesn't get injured, I believe Waddle's going to surpass him.
I don't think a lot of people would disagree with you in that respect.
Well, ESPN does. They got Waddle's going to be in the 40s, I believe.
Yeah, but if you know fantasy football and you know the NFL, you're going to highly consider those 2 guys.
You're putting your number 1 on Tyreek all day.
And you might even consider Jalen Waddle in the 3rd round in a 12-team league as well.
I think I would.
You would even consider Jalen Waddle to be your number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in a lot of fantasy.
That's my point. I would love to go running back. Although in this group, there's a little bit of minefield. But if I can get Henry or Walker out of this group, I would love it. Etienne's going to be a guy that he's not getting the percentage of snaps that I want to see out of a 2nd-round running back. And there's other guys that are going to come later on in this draft, 2 of them from the AFC North, that I know are getting the volume share, barring injury. And I would rather have both of them over Etienne.
And
so
that's what I don't like about Etienne is his usage last year is just really unusual for a player. There was games where he was snap count 88% of the snaps in week 13. And you look at what he produced on the field. Let's go down the list here. Travis Etienne, week 13, he had, what was it here? 7 points.
Yep.
And that was his highest usage. And if you go to week 13 in terms of what he's getting on the ground or what he's getting through the air, he had 3 receptions. He doesn't receive the ball. And so in a PPR,
it's a misnomer about him because everyone thinks he's this great pass catcher because he was a Clemson.
Yeah, in a PPR league, that's not what I'm looking for out of my 2nd round. So if there's a guy I'm not including on this list, it's Travis Etienne. Yeah, I would throw Etienne further down the list as it goes to Kenneth Walker. I think Kenneth Walker is in a very unique situation.
He is.
Seattle running backs. The only Seattle running back that I would have considered taking high at any points in time in their lives were Sean Alexander and Marshawn Lynch, because they had an incredible share of the snap count. They were always on the field. Now, with the way that Seattle's transitioning to an air attack where the running game is still playing an important role in the game, Kenneth Walker now has Zach Charbonneau on behind him as well, and has another running back behind him too. So there's a good chance that Pete Carroll will save Kenneth Walker in games. We'll take him later on through the season, and you might see him. Kenneth Walker is a guy that I could see you winning a championship with because he comes on during the middle of the season, and is used more during the middle of the season. But you're going to need to have something at the beginning of the season, I think, to carry you through some of those things. So I'm not taking Kenneth Walker or Travis Etienne if I have the opportunity in the 2nd round. I'm probably going to be grabbing these wide receivers and probably a couple of the guys from the 3rd round that we're going to mention because, or from the next 30. Yeah. Because, out of this list, if I were to tell you the people that I liked in the order that I liked them.
Before you do that, just let me ask you one question here. So we look at 2 teams that look like they're going to be much more passing in Cleveland and Seattle, with both of their running backs on the board. Overall, who do you think is going to have the better running attack when it's all said and done?
Seattle.
See, I think that's the way it's too, because I think Cleveland's going to be stupid and trying to force so much through Watson that Chubb's going to disappear. And Kenneth Walker's now we're having a different discussion about. It's how much of a bigger pie is he going to get? Because I know Chubb has no backup,
Right.
but the total pie is going to be smaller. And that's the ultimate thing there for your ranking. So I don't want to cut off your rankings here, Bob, but if you can give me your version of this 11 to 20, how would you slice them out?
So at number 1, I guess, or at number 11.
Yeah, how do you want to say it?
At number 11, it's King Henry. I mean,
obviously, yeah.
If I'm coming into a draft in August, I'm even considering King Henry probably top 7 in my mind.
Well, you'd have him ahead of Bijan.
I think if you want, even on a really terrible Tennessee team, he was incredible.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he's getting a lot of carries, which is concern. But he did get injured previously, and then
he's still dominated.
This year coming back, and so I really think that if you are considering Cooper Kupp or Josh Jacobs in the first round, that you should also consider Derrick Henry. He's my number 11 out of this 11 through 20. My next one is Tony Pollard. For the reasons that I stated, I'm really high on Tony Pollard. I would even say that he deserves to be in the first round. My next guy is Stephon Diggs. There's Josh Allen is just night and day better than a lot of the other quarterbacks that are passing these players the ball, minus Jalen Hurts. And so I think that with knowing that the good weather games are going to be good, knowing that they got a running back this year in Damian Harris that could pound the rock a little bit more to keep them healthy down the stretch, I think that there's good opportunity that Stephon Diggs could be your number 2 or 3 wide receiver at year's end if everything shakes down the correct way for him. So we've got Derrick Henry, we've got Tony Pollard, we've got Diggs, then we've got CeeDee Lamb. For the same reason that I said about Tony Pollard, I think it's going to be, we know Dallas is going to score points. If they're going to score points, they're doing it through these two guys. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if you have both of these guys on your team, you are giving yourself a pretty decent chance, if Dallas ends up being really good, to go forward and have a great year. The next player on my list that I have here would be Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, for me, I don't like him, but I do also have a little bit of FOMO from past years about Nick Chubb, is that late second round, early third round, I think is a really relatable position for Nick Chubb. If you get a guy like Jamar Chase and your first running back is Nick Chubb, it's not bad. It's definitely something that you can work with. And even if you don't like Nick Chubb, there's probably another owner in your league that does trade him, because he is a weapon in that offense. He is going to be utilized. The question is how much, with what we saw at the end of the year with Deshaun Watson, is after a whole offseason, after the OTAs, are they going to get in sync, and is it going to be productive? So if you took a wide receiver in the first round and you want to get Nick Chubb, get Nick Chubb. Next, I have Kenneth Walker for the same reason. I think they're 1A, 1B in this regard. So, you got Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, you've got Diggs, you've got CeeDee, Nick Chubb, Walker. Then for me, it's A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown, despite the other I think when you look at what the Eagles are doing and you see what the Eagles have at running back, you see what they have through the air, I would much rather have A.J. Brown with a Devonta Smith than a Tyreek Hill with a Jalen Waddle. I think Jalen Waddle is a superior wide receiver, more so than Devonta Smith.
Yes.
So I think that there's a bigger split there. Then I would have Tyreek Hill there, and then I'd put Travis Etienne in my 20th spot, but knowing that he's not really in my top 20 at all.
Yeah, no, it's based upon the limitations of this grouping. And while I agree with you, King Henry's no doubt. To me, there's two people that stand above and beyond this list and probably really top 10 consideration, and that's Henry and Diggs. For all the reasons you said, we got to look at the quarterback situation for this group. Diggs, no questions asked. Not only does he have a good quarterback, they are best friends, and they love giving each other the ball. My number 3 out of this grouping is actually A.J. Brown, because even with Devonta Smith, I do think there's a much bigger gap between Brown and Smith than there is with Tyreek and Waddle, as we just said there. But I know Hurts is going to get him the ball, and they run slant routes so efficiently. And if the Eagles' left side of their line, which they got rid of, does have a step back, that slant game becomes all the more important which means they will lean more upon A.J. Brown overall than they did on Smith, which gives him upside potential. Then it gets to CeeDee Lamb because of the list of quarterbacks next, Dak is by far better than the rest of them. I don't think that Garoppolo can get the ball downfield to Adams, and I know Tua is not playing a whole year. Dak at least gives me a chance, and we saw even with the backups in there, CD produced. So then we go, boom, after Lamb, I'm probably going with Kenneth Walker, then Chubb, Pollard, and then I get into this weird spot, and this is the interesting part of recording this today on June 3rd. Adams has already said he wants out of Vegas.
Oh, I didn't even rank Adams.
Yeah, Adams already said he wants
19,
out of Vegas.
19.
I took that when you said the ETN was far less. But the biggest problem that he's going to have getting traded now is the fact that Hopkins got cut. Because if you're a team out there like Cleveland, do you want to trade resources or just sign Hopkins? It's not like there's that big of a difference between the two of them at this point. Mm-hmm. They're both, at one point, elite receivers, both coming towards the end. Obviously, I think Adams got a little bit more left on the stick.
Here's the issue here with Devonta Adams, and this is the reason I want to stay away from him.
If he's in Oakland, I don't want him.
Last year, he was the third-ranked wide receiver with 335 points.
With Carr, yeah.
With Carr.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that.
Dude, I'm taking Olave before either Tyreek or Adams.
I don't see that as being even a possibility with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Not a chance.
And so you're taking him now down. I would say that it's fair to assume that with his talent level with Jimmy Garoppolo, that it's fair to assume
it's at least 75 points less.
That he would be at least the 15th wide receiver.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't want to draft the 15th best wide receiver in the second round.
But if he was in Cleveland, I would have him right next to Diggs.
If he was in Cleveland,
because he was a real quarterback, yeah.
If he was in Cleveland, absolutely. With any quarterback that could throw them the ball, I think that he would be higher. And
even if he ends up in someplace like Indy, I would take him.
Well, yeah,
like I would love to see it. Now, granted, he's hard. Like I said, I think the biggest thing that the Raiders got was whenever Hopkins got cut, because I look at this objectively. I get that Adams is a better player than Hopkins, but I don't going to give him a second-round pick. So I'd rather just give up the money. I mean, that's how I approach this.
Yeah.
And this is also the problem that Minnesota is going to have with Cook. The fact that you have Zeke out there on the market, do you really want to trade resources for Cook? But sorry, that was my whole thing. If Devontae Adams is still a Raider, he's my second last on this list. Mm-hmm. If he goes to a place with a decent quarterback, he's with Diggs. But with the unknown, that puts him second last. By default, that puts Tyreek in the 8th spot and ETN at the end. Like I said, I have, just like you, Christian, you had Pollard ahead of Walker. I have Walker there. So now I jumbled up. Let me give you my whole list in order. Pretty straightforward. It would be Henry, Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, and then would come Walker, Hill, Chubb, the mystery that is Adams, and then ETN rounds it out.
Fair enough.
All right, so if you haven't already, please click subscribe. We're going to keep going through ESPN's list. And if you are interested in joining our Best Ball League, let us know in the comments, and then we will reach out to you to make stuff happen.